My name is Zara, and I want to tell you about a bench. Not a remarkable bench, a plain wooden one outside a small pharmacy in a village in Ikiti State, worn smooth from years of people sitting on it while they waited. The kind of bench that exists in 1,000 villages across this continent. The kind you would walk past 100 times without looking at. I walked past it for the first time on a Tuesday afternoon in October when I was 36 years old and had just lost everything I had spent 12 years building. I was not looking at benches. I was looking at the ground. I was counting my steps because counting my steps was the only thing keeping me moving forward. I did not know then what that bench was going to mean to me. I did not know that I would think about it for years, that I would return to it one Sunday afternoon and find it empty and understand something I could not have understood the first time. I am getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to the beginning. 12 years. That is how long I spent building my consulting firm in Lagos. Not 12 years of steady, comfortable growth, 12 years of the specific, grinding, beautiful difficulty of building something real in a city that does not give anything away. I started with 2 clients and a secondhand laptop in a one-room office in Acadia that smelled like someone else's ambition and damp concrete. I ended with 31 clients, a team of 9, an office on the 3rd floor of a building in Victoria Island with windows that looked out over the water, and a name in the industry that people called before they called my competitors. I am telling you this not to impress you. I am telling you this because the size of what I built matters to what I'm about to tell you next. You cannot understand the fall without understanding the height. The fall happened in 1 year, not all at once, in the way that structures weaken, slowly and invisibly, until the day they do not. A partner I had trusted with the firm's finances for 6 years had been making decisions I had not authorized and concealing the consequences with a competence that I still find, even now, almost impressive in its precision. By the time I understood the full shape of what had happened, the firm's finances were in a condition that could not be recovered quietly. There were clients I could not keep, there were staff I could not pay, there were conversations I had to have that I would not wish on anyone. I dissolved the firm on a Friday, I paid what I could pay, I made the calls I had to make, and then I sat in that empty Victoria Island office, the one with the windows that looked over the water, and I stayed until it was dark because I did not yet know how to stand up and be the person who had just done all of that. I went home to a flat that was now too expensive for what I had left. I stayed there for 2 weeks, and then I called my mother and told her I was coming. I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to explain a failure to someone who believed in you completely? Not someone who will judge you, someone whose belief in you is so total that telling them you have failed feels like you are taking something from them rather than giving them information. Tell me in the comments, because the call to my mother was one of the hardest things I have ever done, not because she was unkind, because she was so completely kind. She said, "Come, just come, we will figure it out together." And I went. The village received me the way villages receive these things, with the particular combination of sympathy and curiosity that makes kindness feel slightly dangerous. People were warm to my face. I did not spend much time thinking about what happened behind it. I had larger things to carry. I stayed inside my mother's house for the first 5 days, not because I was hiding, because I was not ready to perform okayness for a public audience. My mother cooked and did not ask too many questions and let me sit on her veranda in the mornings with tea and the sounds of the village waking up around me. She gave me space and proximity simultaneously in the way that only certain mothers know how to do. On the 6th day, I went out. My mother needed her medication and I needed movement. Simple reasons, the kind that require only that you put on shoes and walk. The pharmacy was 7 minutes from my mother's house. I had been there dozens of times over the years, school holidays, Christmas visits, the practical errands of a person returning to their origin point. I knew the owner by name, I knew the layout. I knew the bench outside where people sometimes waited for their prescriptions. I was nearly at the door when he spoke. He was sitting at the far end of the bench. I had seen him peripherally as I approached. An old man, sitting still, the way very old people sometimes sit as if movement becomes optional rather than automatic. I had registered him the way you register background details when you are preoccupied with foreground ones. He said, 12 years is a long time to build something. I stopped walking. I turned and looked at him properly for the first time. He was perhaps 75, perhaps older. He had the particular face of someone whose expressions have long since settled into something permanent. Not hard, not soft, just settled. Clear eyes, the kind that does not come from ease. I said, "I'm sorry?" He said, 12 years, that is what you gave it. People do not always understand what that means. 12 years is not just time. It is the version of yourself that existed during those years. It does not disappear when the thing you built with it disappears. I stood on the path outside that pharmacy, and I felt something I had not expected to feel in that moment. Not comfort, something more complicated than comfort. The feeling of being accurately seen by someone who had no reason to see me accurately. I said, "How do you know about 12 years? He looked at me. He said, "You walk like someone accounting for time, the way you counted your steps coming down that road. The weight you are carrying is not just loss, it is the specific weight of accumulated years that feels suddenly unmoored." I sat down on the bench, not because I decided to, because my legs made the decision before I did. He did not look at me when I sat. He looked ahead at the road. He said, "Can I ask you something?" I said, "Yes." He said, "What did you learn in those 12 years that you could not have learned any other way?" Now I want to stop here and ask you something. If someone asked you that question about your hardest years, your biggest loss, your most expensive failure, what would your answer be? Not the answer you would give in a job interview. The real one, the one you have never said out loud because it contains things that are true but not presentable. Think about it, and if you want, tell me in the comments, because what I said to that old man on that bench is the most honest thing I have said in my adult life, and saying it changed something. I told him the truth, all of it, or as much of it as came out in the 20 minutes we sat on that bench together. I told him about the firm and the partner and the dissolution. I told him what I had learned, not the professional lessons, the real ones, about the cost of trusting completely without verifying, about the specific vanity of believing that because you have built something, you understand it fully, about the way success can make you less careful precisely because everything is going well, and going well feels like evidence that your judgment is sound. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Those lessons are not the punishment. Those are the qualification." I said, "Qualification for what?" He said, "For whatever comes next. You could not have learned those things without paying exactly what you paid, and what comes next will require exactly those lessons, not versions of them, those exact ones. The specificity matters." He paused. He said, "The thing about losing something you built is that you keep the builder. That is the part people forget to account for in the loss. The thing is gone, but the person who built it, the actual capacity, the actual knowledge, the actual understanding of how to construct something from nothing, that does not go when the thing goes. It goes with you, and it is worth more than what you lost because you cannot replace it by finding it somewhere else. You can only have it by having been through exactly what you have been through." He looked at me for the first time since I had sat down. He said, "Rest. Not for a week, until you are actually rested, until the grief has finished moving through you rather than just being covered over. And then start again. Not the same thing, something that uses what you have actually learned rather than repeating what you already knew before it went wrong." He stood up. He was moving before I registered that the conversation was ending. I said, "Wait, I don't know your name." He said, already moving away, "You do not need my name. You need what I told you." And he walked away down the road. I watched until he turned the corner past the old cotton tree, and then he was gone. I went inside the pharmacy. I collected my mother's medication. I stood at the counter for a moment before leaving, and I said to the pharmacist, a woman named Mrs. Afolaby, who had worked there for as long as I could remember, I said, "The old man who was sitting outside on the bench, do you know him?" She looked at me with a slightly puzzled expression. She said, "Which old man? Nobody was sitting on the bench when you came in. I was watching. I saw you walk up the road and go straight inside." I said, "He was at the far end, older man, gray hair, clear eyes." She thought about it. She said, "I did not see anyone, but I was in the back for a few minutes before you arrived. Perhaps he left before I noticed." I walked outside. The bench was empty. The road in both directions was quiet. The afternoon light was warm and still. I stood there for a moment, and then I walked home. I did not tell my mother what had happened. I did not tell anyone. I held it the way you hold certain experiences, not because they are too private to share, but because sharing them before you understand them fully risks losing something in the translation. I thought about what he had said. I thought about it the way you think about something that has landed accurately, not as a question, but as a statement that keeps revealing new depths the longer you sit with it. The thing about losing something you built is that you keep the builder. I stayed in my mother's village for 4 months, not 2 weeks, not 1 month, 4 months. I rested until the grief finished moving through me rather than just being covered over. I could feel the difference, not a sudden shift, a gradual one. The mornings when I woke up and the first thought was not the loss, but something else. The afternoons when I sat on my mother's veranda and felt the particular quality of a mind that has stopped being in a crisis and started being available again. During those 4 months, I also made a list, not a plan, a list, what I actually knew, what I could actually do, what the 12 years had given me that nobody could dissolve. The list was specific and honest and shorter than I wanted it to be, and every item on it was true. When I was ready, and I knew I was ready because I woke up one morning and the first thought I had was a specific business structure that solved a problem I had noticed in the market 3 years earlier and never had the space to address, when I was ready, I went back. Lagos received me the way it receives everyone, without ceremony and without memory. The city does not hold your past against you. It also does not protect you from it. It simply presents itself in all its enormity and indifference and waits to see what you will do. I found a small shared office space in Yaba, 1 desk, a computer, a registered business name, mine alone this time, no partners, no shared signatures on anything that mattered. I called 4 people who knew my work from the early years of the first firm, before the growth and the Victoria Island office and all the things that had come with them, people who knew what I could actually do. 2 of them gave me work, and then they told others. I will not tell you the full story of the years that followed because it is still being written and some chapters are not finished. What I will tell you is the shape of where I am. 3 years after I sat on that bench, I have a firm again, smaller than the first one, deliberately smaller, built with a different understanding of what size costs and what it requires. 11 clients, 4 staff whose names are on the work they produce because I know what it feels like when that doesn't happen. An office in Ikeja, not Victoria Island, Ikeja, where I started, which feels right in a way I cannot fully articulate, but that I stopped trying to articulate because some rightness does not need language. I went back to my mother's village on a Sunday, the month the second firm turned its first meaningful profit. I sat at her table and ate her food and let the weekend be what it was. On Sunday afternoon, I walked to the pharmacy. The bench was empty, warm in the afternoon sun, slightly worn, exactly as I remembered it. I sat on it for a few minutes, not waiting for anything, not expecting anything, just sitting on it the way you sit somewhere that means something to you and letting it mean something. I thought about an old man with clear eyes who had said things he should not have been able to say and who had walked away before I could ask him any of the questions I would have asked him. I thought about what he had given me, not comfort, not reassurance, but a direction, a way of understanding what I had been through that made it useful rather than just painful. I thought about the bench itself, plain wood, worn smooth, the kind that exists in 1,000 villages, the kind you would walk past 100 times without looking at. I had looked at it, and it had changed everything. I want to end with what I believe now that I did not believe before any of this happened, not as a lesson. I am suspicious of stories that end with clean lessons because life usually does not produce those. As an observation, something I have noticed to be true in my own experience. The things that are taken from you reveal the things that cannot be taken, not immediately, not while you're in the middle of the loss, but eventually when you have rested long enough and the grief has finished and you are able to look clearly at what remains, you see it, the actual substance, the thing that was always there underneath everything you had built on top of it. That substance is yours, completely and permanently yours. No partner, no dissolution, no failed year can reach it, because it is not the thing, it is the person who built the thing. And that person walks away from every loss they survive. They walk away carrying everything that matters. God does not send messengers to explain what you lost. He sends messengers to show you what you kept. I kept the builder. That turned out to be enough.